This viewer, though, is asking for advice on how you would prevent a child from being influenced by these social media celebrities who may have this false worldly view or worldly idea of what masculinity actually looks like. So what would you do to protect your children from someone like this Andrew Tate or any of these other?
Well, you probably are more familiar with Andrew Tate than I am.
Maybe.
I saw a little bit of his performance, an interview with him. And he impressed me as being just kind of a cocky, arrogant sort of individual, and associates that with manhood, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he certainly rejects that wet noodle type of limp, wimpy sort of attitude of the new man, the new age man.
Yeah.
But you know, the other extreme is terrible too. I mean, sometimes the extremes feed off each other, and if he is going to present an idea of manhood as the barbarian man, then we can't endorse that in any way too. We have to recognize the danger of that. You know, our young men are rebelling against this modern world, which is basically telling them that they have to surrender their masculinity to get in touch with their feminine side, as they used to say, and to conduct themselves more as feminine than masculine. They talk about toxic masculinity. The fact that they talk about it, though, this shouldn't provoke just a knee-jerk reaction in us, saying that there is no such thing as toxic masculinity. There is, but it's not really masculinity. It's a facade of great bravado and basically being a braggart and being a obnoxious fellow who does not really necessarily take responsibility for his behavior. He thinks a life of promiscuity makes him a man. I mean, the modern sports figures often exude this very attitude, you know. I've got the fast cars, I've got all the women, I've got all this and that. The other thing, I'm living the high life, and that makes me a man, and you should admire my masculinity in having all these things. This doesn't make a man. Not at all. I mean, you know, in other words, it actually might keep him from being a man and just keep him on the level of a boy. That's how a boy sees what a man should be, as, you know, having all these things. It's not so much a matter of who he is as a matter of what he has. And I gather that this Andrew Tate does not promote the same concept of manhood, like the knight, right? Of chivalry that we talked about last week.
Right.
That's what I gather. So, well, the question here then is, how do we protect our boys against it?
Yeah.
Well, let's face it, Tom. I mean, the only way you can protect your boys against a false, misleading, and toxic concept, a false concept of masculinity and manhood, is to give them the true concept of masculinity and the true concept of manhood. Where do we find it? We find it in our faith. We find it in sacred scripture. We find it in our Catholic tradition. We find it in the lives of the saints. We find that concept of what the true Catholic man is. That's why I was talking about the knights, because the knights epitomized that Catholic concept of who a man is, and what it is to be truly masculine. And, you know, I mentioned all the virtues, the knightly virtues that were expected of a man, whose hand they put a sword in, and they put on a horse, and given the mission to go defend the defenseless and spend yourself for, you know, serving God.